When did 3 o'clock in the morning become the hour of worst-case scenarios? I used to sleep peacefully through the night, but at 77, I'd become an expert at imagining everything that could go wrong. It would start with something small, a slight chest pain I'd felt earlier, or a phone call from my daughter that had gone to voicemail. My mind would grab onto these tiny seeds of concern and water them until they grew into towering forests of catastrophe. What if that chest pain was my heart? What if something had happened to Sarah and she couldn't call back? What if my savings weren't enough for the health care I might need? What if? By 4 in the morning, I'd have lived through a dozen disasters that existed nowhere but in my imagination. By 5, I'd be wide awake, exhausted before the day even began, my mind buzzing with anxious energy that felt impossible to quiet. This had become my nightly routine, not the peaceful sleep I'd once taken for granted, but a marathon of mental gymnastics that left me more tired than any physical exercise ever had. During the day, it wasn't much better. I'd catch myself mentally rehearsing conversations that might never happen, planning for problems that didn't exist, trying to control outcomes that were months or years away. My mind had become a runaway train, and I seemed to have lost the brakes. Friends would offer well-meaning advice: just don't think about it. Try to stay positive. What's the point of worrying? But you can't just stop thinking any more than you can stop breathing. The harder I tried to push away anxious thoughts, the louder they seemed to become. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in the community garden. I was there early, hoping the physical activity might tire my mind enough to find some peace when I noticed him. Mr. Nakamura was 85, moved slowly but deliberately, and worked his small plot with a focus I hadn't seen in years. What struck me wasn't just his careful attention to each plant, but the expression on his face. Complete calm, no furrowed brow, no distant look of someone mentally elsewhere. He seemed entirely present, entirely at peace. After watching him for several mornings, curiosity overcame my shyness. I approached with an offer to help weed his tomatoes, though really I was hoping to understand his secret. "You seem so peaceful," I said as we worked side by side. "Don't you ever worry about things about the future?" He smiled gently, his weathered hands never pausing in their work. "I worry," he said, "but worry is like these weeds. If you let it grow wild, it chokes out everything beautiful. If you tend it wisely, even worry can nourish the garden." I didn't understand what he meant at first, but he began to teach me something that would transform not just my sleepless nights, but my entire relationship with the future. He introduced me to Zazen breathing, not the complicated meditation I'd tried and failed at before, but something beautifully simple. "When mind gets busy with tomorrow," he said, "bring attention back to breath, not to change breath, not to make it better, just to notice it." That very afternoon, when I felt the familiar spiral of what-if thoughts beginning, I tried his technique. Instead of fighting the worried thoughts or trying to replace them with positive ones, I simply placed my attention on the sensation of breathing. In for 4 counts, noticing the cool air entering my nostrils. Out for 6 counts, feeling the warm air leaving my body. Not forcing anything, not trying to achieve some special state, just returning my attention to this simple present moment experience whenever my mind wandered to future fears. Something remarkable happened. The anxious thoughts didn't disappear immediately, but they lost their grip on me. Instead of being swept away by mental storms about tomorrow, I had an anchor in the present moment. Mr. Nakamura also taught me about Wabi-Sabi, the Japanese appreciation of imperfection and impermanence. As we worked in the garden one morning, he pointed to a section where several plants hadn't thrived despite his careful tending. "In America, you might see failure here," he said, crumbling dry soil between his fingers. "In Japan, we see nature being nature. Some things grow, some things don't. Both are part of the garden's beauty." I realized I'd been approaching my life like a perfectionist gardener, trying to control every outcome, prevent every possible problem, guarantee every future happiness. The uncertainty inherent in being human felt like personal failure rather than simply life being life. "Worry comes," Mr. Nakamura explained, "when we try to make uncertain things certain. But uncertainty is not problem to solve. Uncertainty is the nature of being alive." This shifted something fundamental in my thinking. Instead of seeing my inability to predict and control the future as a weakness, I began to understand it as simply the human condition. Everyone lives with uncertainty. Everyone faces the unknown. My worry wasn't evidence that something was wrong, it was evidence that I was alive and cared about the people and things that mattered to me. But the deepest transformation came through something unexpected. Mr. Nakamura invited me to join him for tea ceremony lessons with Mrs. Sato, an elderly woman who had been practicing this art for 60 years. I expected elaborate rituals and complicated procedures. Instead, I found something profoundly simple, the practice of giving complete attention to one thing at a time. When you hold the cup, Mrs. Sato instructed, feel only the cup. When you taste the tea, taste only the tea. When you listen to water boiling, hear only the water. This sounded almost too simple to be useful. But as I practiced, I began to understand its power. My mind had become accustomed to splitting its attention between the present moment and imagined futures. Tea ceremony was training in wholehearted presence. For 20 minutes, 3 times a week, I would practice this focused attention. At first, my mind would wander constantly to tomorrow's worries or yesterday's regrets. But gradually, I developed the ability to notice when my attention had drifted and gently return it to the simple task at hand. The effects began to ripple into the rest of my life. When I cooked dinner, I found myself fully present to chopping vegetables rather than mentally rehearsing difficult conversations. When I talked with friends, I listened completely rather than planning what to say next. When I walked in the neighborhood, I noticed the actual sights and sounds around me, instead of being lost in mental movies about uncertain futures. But there was still something I didn't understand about Mr. Nakamura's deep peace. How had he learned not just to manage worry, but to live with such fundamental calm? What was the source of his unshakable serenity? That's when Mrs. Sato shared 3 words that would revolutionize how I thought about worry, about time, and about the nature of peace itself. 3 words that contain the essence of Japanese wisdom about why some minds rest naturally while others spin endlessly. But I hadn't discovered the most important thing yet. The reason some cultures have developed such profound practices for mental quiet, the secret that would teach me that a peaceful mind isn't the absence of worry, but something far more beautiful and attainable than I'd ever imagined. Mrs. Sato's 3 words were so simple, they almost seemed ordinary, this moment only. But the way she said them with such quiet conviction made me pause my teacup halfway to my lips. Western mind, she explained, always living in 2 times at once. Present time with body, future time with thoughts. This creates what you call worry. Japanese practice bring both body and mind at the same time, this moment only. She demonstrated by slowly lifting her own teacup, her attention completely absorbed in this simple action. When I lift cup, I am only lifting cup, not thinking about what comes after cup, not remembering yesterday's tea, this moment only. I realized I'd been living in a constant state of temporal displacement. My body would be in the garden, but my mind would be at next week's doctor appointment. My hands would be washing dishes, but my thoughts would be rehearsing tomorrow's difficult phone call. No wonder I felt so exhausted. I was essentially living 2 lives simultaneously. That afternoon, I decided to experiment with Mrs. Sato's teaching. Instead of my usual mental time travel, I committed to spending 1 full hour in this moment only. I started by making lunch. Usually I'd spend the entire process mentally elsewhere, planning errands, worrying about bills, replaying conversations. This time I focused completely on what was actually happening. The sound of onions sizzling in the pan, the smell of garlic releasing its fragrance, the feel of the wooden spoon in my hand as I stirred. For the first time in months, my mind felt quiet, not empty but focused, like a camera lens coming into perfect focus after being blurry for so long. The 4th practice Mr. Nakamura taught me was mono no aware, the Japanese understanding of impermanence that brings peace rather than sadness. He shared this lesson during cherry blossom season as we sat beneath trees dropping their petals like gentle snow. Americans fear change, he said, catching a pink petal in his palm. You want to keep good times forever, prevent bad times from coming. But this is like trying to stop river from flowing. Japanese wisdom beauty comes not from permanence, but from accepting flow. I watched the petals fall around us, each one beautiful, precisely because its moment was brief. You worry about future, he continued, because you try to make temporary things permanent. Health, happiness, security, all beautiful, all temporary. When you accept this, worry becomes different kind of energy. This insight transformed my relationship with the future in a way I hadn't expected. Instead of seeing change and uncertainty as threats to be prevented, I began to understand them as the natural rhythm of life. My health would fluctuate, my circumstances would shift, my loved ones would face challenges, not because something was wrong, but because this is how life works. Accepting impermanence didn't make me careless or passive. Instead, it freed up enormous amounts of mental energy I'd been wasting on trying to control the uncontrollable. I could make reasonable preparations for the future without exhausting myself, trying to guarantee specific outcomes. But the real breakthrough came 6 weeks after beginning these practices. I woke up one morning and realized something profound. I had slept through the entire night. No 3 o'clock catastrophizing sessions. No mental rehearsals of disaster scenarios. Just peaceful, restorative sleep from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. More remarkably, when I did have a concern during the day, a genuine worry about my grandson's upcoming surgery, my mind approached it differently. Instead of spiraling into elaborate worst-case scenarios, I found I could hold the concern gently, like holding that fragile cherry blossom petal. I could acknowledge my love and fear without being consumed by them. I called my daughter to offer practical support rather than anxiously asking for reassurance. I researched the procedure to understand what was actually involved rather than imagining elaborate complications. I prayed and sent loving thoughts rather than rehearsing tragic outcomes. The worry was still there, but it had transformed from a wild, destructive force into something more like concerned love. It motivated caring action rather than paralyzing fear. That's when I finally understood what Mr. Nakamura had meant about worry nourishing the garden when tended wisely. Worry at its core is love. Love that fears loss, love that wants to protect, love that cares deeply about outcomes. The problem isn't the worry itself, but letting it grow wild and unchecked. When tended with presence and acceptance, worry becomes a different kind of energy entirely. It becomes mindful concern that leads to appropriate action. It becomes grateful awareness of how much we have to lose because we have so much that's precious. It becomes compassionate recognition that uncertainty is the price we pay for the gift of caring deeply. 3 months after beginning these practices, something beautiful happened. My daughter called one evening, her voice tight with stress about her teenager struggles at school. In the past, I would have absorbed her anxiety and spent the next several hours mentally spinning through all the ways this situation could deteriorate. Instead, I found myself listening with complete presence. I offered gentle questions rather than anxious advice. I held space for her worry without taking it on as my own. When we hung up, I felt clear and peaceful rather than agitated and exhausted. This moment only had taught me that I could care deeply without living in imagined futures. I could love fully without trying to control outcomes. I could acknowledge uncertainty without being destroyed by it. The Japanese secret to a quieter mind isn't about stopping worry. It's about changing your relationship with time itself. When you learn to live fully in this present moment, the future stops feeling like a constant threat and starts feeling like simply the next moment, which will become present when it arrives. It's practicing Zazen breathing when anxious thoughts arise, not to make them disappear, but to anchor yourself in the calm stability of now. It's embracing Wabi-Sabi acceptance that uncertainty is natural, rather than fighting against the fundamental nature of existence. It's cultivating tea ceremony mindfulness that trains your attention to rest naturally in whatever you're actually doing. Most importantly, it's understanding mono-no, aware that everything changes, everything passes, and this impermanence is what makes each moment precious rather than terrifying. The quieter mind doesn't come from eliminating thoughts about the future. It comes from developing such a rich, full relationship with the present moment that the future loses its power to steal your peace. When you are completely present to stirring soup, the soup becomes fascinating. When you are fully attentive to a friend's conversation, the conversation becomes nourishing. When you're entirely here with whatever this moment offers, worry about other moments simply loses its urgency. Not because you stop caring about tomorrow, but because you discover that this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this cup of tea, this patch of sunlight on the wall contains everything you actually need for peace. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, here's a gentle truth. Your peace is found in this moment, not in solving a tomorrow that hasn't arrived. You've navigated countless nights of worry to get here. You have the strength to find rest. Try this simple action tonight. As you lay your head on the pillow, place one hand over your heart. Just feel its steady rhythm for 3 slow breaths. Don't try to change anything, just notice it. That physical feeling is your anchor to right now. What simple anchor helps you find your way back to the present moment when your mind starts to race? Please share your wisdom in the comments. Your idea might be the very thing that helps someone else sleep peacefully tonight. To continue receiving these practical tools for a quieter mind, please consider subscribing. Every conversation we have here is a gentle step toward finding more peace in an uncertain world. And if you know someone whose mind races with worry, perhaps sharing this talk could offer them a moment of relief. Until we speak again, may your nights be peaceful.